Welcome to Accessibility Insights. I'm Eugene Wu, the CEO of Venngage. For those of you who don't know, Venngage is a design tool with accessibility features built in. But unlike other design tools, you can actually export your designs in a PDF compliant format. So without further ado, we have a very cool guest today. His name is Shawn Jordison. He is known as the accessibility guy. So Shawn has many, many years of experience in accessibility, and he is also a well-known content creator with a popular YouTube channel with over 340 videos. So welcome to the podcast, Shawn.
Thank you, Eugene. I appreciate you you having me. I've been excited to do this today, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. So why don't we jump straight into it? I'm really curious to hear about your story. I think you're kind of one of the most unique guests we've had so far. How did you get into the whole YouTube content creation, and how did you, become the accessibility guy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I ask myself this sometimes too. I'm not entirely sure how I got to it. The best version I can give you is that, working traditional jobs in accessibility over the last 15 years really offered some powerful insight into what I was interested in, right? And as an entrepreneur, I think that is one of the hardest lessons we can learn is like, what is it that's actually intrinsically motivating you to do something, right? Because entrepreneurship is a grind in some cases, right? It's a lot of work all the time, sometimes for no money. And so when I found myself in these traditional roles of, I've worked many different jobs throughout my career that we can talk about or go into depth, but essentially what would happen is I would land myself in a role. I would streamline it to the point that I felt like I didn't have a whole lot of work to do. And then I found myself like maybe questioning leadership and it's just the truth, right? I found myself in this weird position and I was very young. I got my master's degree when I was 24, full-time tenure faculty position at one point when I was like 26. Anywho's, I found myself like hitting the ceiling real quick. And what started the birth of YouTube was me going out on my own as an entrepreneur, finding clients, working in accessibility in many different facets, kind of chasing money to an extent. And to be honest, I just felt like there was a lack of content in not only the accessibility world, but where my background stemmed from, which is what we call alternate media, essentially providing documents to students with disabilities in alternate formats. So if you're a student with a disability, and you need something other than a printed book, right? We may take it into audio or braille or large print. There was no content on the web that really showed users kind of how to do it properly. Additionally, I got tired of being asked the same questions. Why do we have to do it this way? What do you mean by headings? Like, how does a screen reader read this thing? Essentially, that led to the creation of a couple of my first videos, which was like how to do this very specific thing on YouTube. And I would just send it to the people. And that today is still a mechanism I use to create content. So being in the field for so long, I have sort of all these little sources. And as they drip down, I'm like, hey, I'll make a video on that. And lo and behold, that's sort of where the accessibility guy was born. Now, fun fact, as an entrepreneur, I've gone through about 20 different names. It wasn't, I didn't find the accessibility guy until about 2 years ago. And I actually took it from a YouTube creator that I really like in a completely different niche. Not the name, but the style of the name, just being really direct and self-labeling, like I'm gonna be the accessibility guy. No one's gonna remember Shawn Jordison as much as I love, my beautiful face. It's just the fact. People don't care about that. They know accessibility. And so hopefully when you go onto YouTube or Google to try to learn how to do some of these important topics that we teach, you're gonna see my face. So that was a really long-winded answer, but that's how I got to the accessibility guy in creating YouTube content. People asking questions all the time.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I am an entrepreneur as well. And I can totally understand how you kind of got to. Although I'm not a content creator, I think I think it's another level up. I've tried to become a content creator. It is tough.
It's tough, man. It's tough to stay on it. I think that's the hardest
Yes,
part.
consistency. Yeah.
It pairs well with entrepreneurship, right? Like whether it's content creation, and you probably are a content creator, you're just not recording yourself, right? So
Yep.
there's that idea that turning on the camera and talking to an open mic, that really changed my perception. Once I accepted that I was an entrepreneur and accessibility is my craft, it
Right.
changed everything for me. So
Are you
definitely.
I need to ask you this. Are you an extrovert by nature, or are you sort of more introvert? Because it usually, content creators, you kind of think of them as extroverts and it's so natural for them, or is this all just practice?
It's a little bit of both. I would say I'm definitely a natural person. My mom used to tell me I never met a stranger before. And I think if there was any gift that I was born with, it's just that of people skills, communication. I've always enjoyed speaking and talking, but then when I found a platform to do it, it sort of, like I said, changed things. I didn't start on YouTube. I started in person giving seminars and trainings on accessibility. And then when COVID hit, I went online and found myself in this role where we were doing 3 to 5, sometimes more 90-minute sessions per week on accessibility topics. And you just kind of grind and grind and grind. And, I'm not a robot. And so the more I can engage my audience, whether it's a real audience or not, I find that it's not only more fun for me, but it's more educational for the end user, right? Like even this
Right.
conversation, right? We're doing a little thing, but at the end
Yeah.
of the day, I'm talking to Eugene, and that's really all that matters to me. So
Yep. Cool. So you said you started out in different formats. Now I did look at some of your other channels. It looks like you're on Fiverr as well, which I was like, oh, cool.
yeah, yeah.
Sean's on Fiverr, and but it's so. Tell us a little bit about is YouTube your biggest channel, and how about all these other channels like Fiverr, Instagram, maybe even I don't know, LinkedIn. Are you active on everything, or is it mainly YouTube?
That's a great question. It's funny. I was pretty much active on none. Um, I had my regular work and I would get people emailing me for, hey, Shawn, can you tackle this? What do you think about doing this?
Right.
I never really had an online presence um, up until a couple of years ago where I really started trying. So to answer your question, YouTube's the biggest one. Um,
Okay.
as an entrepreneur, you kind of find yourself in a whole bunch of different areas. I don't love social media, just straight up. I think that it's just it's a requirement for having a business, but I don't love it. I just don't. And that's the truth. Um, so whenever I would post on social media, nothing would happen. I'd be like, all right, well, this is a waste of my time. It's a waste of everybody else's time. Accessibility has this weird notion, in my opinion, that I could put myself in front of people all day, but unless they are doing what we do, it's kind of a pointless activity. Whereas with YouTube, even looking at some of my stats, new videos don't do great, but 6-month old videos sometimes get tens of thousands of views because people search them or they become a trend. So to answer your question, yeah, right now the biggest way you can find me is on YouTube or my website, theaccessibilityguide.com. I've also recently launched a community where I have 6 courses. That is a different URL. We also post on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram Reels, and then in terms of business, I am all over the place. Fiverr, I've cornered the market. Fun thing about Fiverr, so I have over 700 completed gigs, I believe.
Yeah, you have a lot. I was
However,
surprised.
there's no accessibility niche. There's no category. So I
Okay.
have built my little accessibility corner in Fiverr by just being active. Like what I'm trying to say is there's no home for accessibility. I think the company is based in like Sweden or some other country that doesn't have the same level of accessibility laws. Um, and so there's literally no category. I can't use tags for 508 with CAG compliance, screen reader disability. All of my content, all of the stuff that I offer through there has been piecemealed together to whatever pre-existing structure that they've had. But I've been on there for so long, you'll find that almost every other accessibility offering from Fiverr, they've literally stolen my copy. But there's no way to. What do they say? There's some phrase that is like, well, if people are stealing your stuff, then it must be the best. So I try to take it
Best
as a
compliment.
compliment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
on Fiverr, it's the Wild West. So, if you just for sake of the recording here, reach out to me directly. There's plenty of ways you can get in contact with me. It is a lot uh more, wait, I don't want to say cheap. It's less expensive to find me directly than to go through a third party platform. So just want to say that.
Yes, and we will have your contact information
Perfect.
in the post for sure. Uh, so while we're, since we're talking about content, tell us a little bit about your process. Now that you've spent a couple of years, and I know how challenging it can be. I've tried to create content consistently, and it's very, very challenging. Tell us a bit about your process. How do you come up with your idea, and how do you keep that machine sort of like churning?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I love that question, and I'm a little ill prepared in the sense of I'm not entirely sure, but this is the method that I currently use. So it started with what I thought people wanted to find, right?
Right.
Oh, how to make a PDF accessible. People search that. They don't. They don't search that. What they do search is this very specific thing, how to embed fonts in Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, how to
Oh,
resize pages in Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. And so instead of my concept is the more direct and intense I could get with the search, like there should only be a couple of results when you search for these fine-tooth things, and hopefully they're me. And so what I've spent a lot of my time doing over the years is narrowing in on what the problems are. And to be honest, my current method is when I get stuck, I add the element to my list. So because I work in remediation, because I have an accessibility company where I'm not only designing training, giving instructor-led training, I have 6 courses that are live right now, remediation, and I do this area of alternate media where we use complex software programs to create braille and audio, right? I have all these input mechanisms, right? And Fiverr jobs or whatever. I personally have all these inputs, in my education, the listservs I'm a part of, the community I'm a part of, Slack, accessibility, you know, the message boards. I have a million inputs. And so what happens is when I'm live in the world remediating a document that's a foreign language, there's this problem. Um, I will add it to my little list and try to get permission from my client to record, or I will go back and recreate the problem and I'll just hit record. So that's sort of like not the end of the statement. I had learned through a lot of reading. I follow a lot of finance and entrepreneur people. I'm sure you do too. And there's
yep.
techniques. So
Yep.
days of recording, days of editing. I personally now have an editing team that handles most of the editing for my videos. So if you haven't seen me in a while, check out some of the new content. It's a lot better, more professional. I've been doing everything in-house for years and years and years. Um, to get back to that original question, though, as things come across my desk that I personally have trouble with, I'm like, this will be a good video. Um, I do a precursory search on YouTube or Google, and if it's flooded, I won't do it. But accessibility is it's vast, and I'm lucky to have the experience that I've had over the years that I've been doing this, that I can plug where these problems are. Because it's not just how to create an accessible PDF. It's like in Vengage's case, right? How to go from Vengage to an accessible PDF. Well, there's
Right.
not a whole lot of work because your product does that well, but I've covered other products that do, editor to PDF,
Right.
PowerPoint to PDF, Word to PDF. What about Word to PDF in foreign language? And so it just cascades real quick into covering this, and this. And then I have a master list. So when content comes in, when I'm working live with anybody, I have a little form that I have of content ideas, and I just put it in. And then when I go to create content, I either have something in mind that I want to do, or I'll go right to my list. And right now I've got about 85 ideas on it. And that's a
Wow.
real number. But they're so specific. So it's like how to do this real specific thing in this specific software. And yeah, that's sort of the goal there.
Wow. That's and the really so what's surprising to me is the really specific thing gets you views, eh? Like that's amazing. Yeah.
Sort of. They're stacked on top of each other, right? So like, I wish I could sit here and tell you like I even in your intro, you're like saying how great the YouTube channel is. In my head, I'm like, Psh, this ain't nothing. I'm hoping this is the start, right? But I do have a mechanism down. But yeah, I mean, if I go even into some of the stats, it's kind of crazy to see what happens over time. Um, And so while things may not pop off immediately, if I just look at even some of the last ones, like I have this video on Otter AI, how to use the Otter AI
Right.
summary chat feature, 250 views. But I'm putting out 3 to 5 videos a week, and then they often compound over time, or they get shared, or they get
Right.
embedded in educational institutions or government entities. Because what I cover is a lot of Section 508, which is a US law
Yep.
by reference to WCAG. And so it just kind of like, if you're searching for that video or that topic, right? How do I add a table summary to a PDF? How do I
Right.
do this thing? It tends to, the video may not go crazy, but I now got that person and they come
Right.
back to see,
Right.
oh, what's Shawn doing? What's Shawn doing? And then they share the videos with their organization or their colleague. And yeah, it's a slow and steady grind, my friend. This
And
is
and and can you attribute, so when people contact, I'm assuming a lot of your customers are inbound. When they, can you attribute it back to the YouTube channel and go like, yeah, I
totally
saw your video on this, or someone
100%.
told me about oh, you can. Okay, got it.
My, I would
Right.
say the biggest contracts I've ever worked, like, 6-figure contracts
Right.
or 5-figure, whatever, have come from people who have found me on YouTube.
Okay.
And I think part of it is there are lots of accessibility companies out there. There are a lot of people that do what we do, but something that I like to think that I bring that is unique is you get me. You get this, whether it's friendly banter, communication. I like to think one of my skills is taking complex tasks and technical information and describing it in a way that someone can understand on a lower level or a technical level. Like, not only can we explain, the requirements for accessible math in a PDF to a faculty member who is creating accessible PDFs, but I can also explain it to the IT guy or the web developer as to what needs to happen to convert it back to HTML. And so I think that is part of the allure in working with me is you get Shawn,
Right.
my tagline is your champion for inclusion. It used to be your personal accessibility expert, but the moral of the story is like, I'm here to support you. Whether it's an organization, an individual, my goal is to help either steer the ship in the right direction, get you the staff that you need, or teach the people in the trenches how to do the stuff that your business is requiring to do. Sorry, I
Very
went on
cool.
one.
No, no, that's so it's great to hear that content works. Like YouTube, YouTube is social media to me. Like social media does work. Of course it does. Like everyone's on it. I mean, I go to
100%.
YouTube all the time. I want to touch a little bit. You mentioned a little bit about working with STEM content. I know that's a specialty of yours. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Yeah, I don't want to call it a niche, but it is kind of technical. Like,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about STEM content, and then specifically math content. What are the challenges and how do you make those type of content accessible?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and I'll do my best not to yammer on about it. If you'd like to find out more information, I do instructor-led presentations on how to make math and STEM accessible. You can cut that if you want. So math and STEM, it's tricky, Eugene. If I were to classify accessibility into like levels of 1 through 10, math, 10 being the most complex to make accessible, 10
Yeah.
is like 1 million, excuse me, math is 1 million level difficulty. It is
Oh,
very
wow.
hard. Um,
Okay.
the reason it's hard is not because of what you think usually. It's not the math. It's not 2 plus 2, right? It's not an algebraic equation that makes it difficult. Here's what makes it difficult. There are many types of encoding that you can apply to a math on the back end that changes the way that it displays in a particular web browser, program, document. In addition to that, we have a layered complexity of assistive technology. Different forms of assistive technology can interact more, better or worse with the encoding that's used in the math. So a traditional accessibility path might be, well, I have an accessible PDF and I'm using JAWS. That's okay. We can figure that
Right.
out. With math, we have, okay, well, I am using VoiceOver or TalkBack, or I'm using a text-to-speech tool, and the math could be in a PDF, a Word document, an HTML file. And in addition to that, it could be encoded in the different types of encoding. The most popular that you see is Law Tech and Math ML, but the
Hmm.
true universal accessibility for math is the encoding of Math ML. To further hit on this, when you use an equation editor in Word, right? You go to insert equation, pop in the quadratic equation or
Right.
what. It's actually inserted as what's called a OMML object. It's Microsoft's version of math. And sometimes it works with JAWS. Sometimes it works with NVDA, but not all the time. You have to use these third-party tools to convert from OMML into either LawTech or MathML, all of which, by the way, is on the back end. So it's kind of like
Huh.
HTML for description purposes. It doesn't change the way the math looks visually. And then furthermore, PDF, as an example, does not support any of those elements. So PDF in its natural habitat, Adobe Acrobat, Foxit, whatever, all these tools that used to create it, right now, math is not a supported object in a PDF.
Hmm.
So to make math accessible in a PDF, here's like a great description. It has to be inserted as an image, and then you have to do your best to do English-based alternate text,
Oh, wow.
which
Okay.
essentially comes down to the law tech description. So this was
Right.
like a really long-winded answer, but the math isn't the complex part. It's all the coding that goes into it. It's the program in which we are providing to students or people with disabilities. HTML with MathML is going to be your most accessible bet.
Hmm.
And even with that, there are limitations. So when you start getting into higher level math or organic chemistry or complex computer coding, we take what I've just described and you compound it a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then we get into the debate of accommodation versus accessibility. But I won't take it there for now. Um, the the basis of that is like there's only so much we could do to make something accessible. And then we need to, by definition, in our organizations, if you're producing accessible math or what have you should have something, in your mission statement or behind the scenes that allows somebody to request accommodations, similar to how you might request audio description or closed
Right.
captioning, right? Math or complex maps or graphics, these types of things might need to be turned into tactile graphics. And so, yeah, to circle back, to make accessible math, there's a lot of things to consider, but it's not the math that makes it complex. It's the encoding, it's the final file type, and it's the compatibility with the type of assistive technology that you are using.
Wow. And in your experience, what format, like what are professors, or academics using to create STEM content, like STEM content? Is it Word? Is it PowerPoint? Are you looking at mainly those files, or is it mainly like PDFs that you've been asked to remediate or to like fix?
It's the gamut. So to answer your question of what files do I tend to remediate the most, it really depends. It depends on the client. Typically, math comes from my education academic clients, not
Hmm.
so much government unless it's a budget report, but simple numbers are not, in my brain, are not considered math. We don't have to encode them, right? It's regular Roman numerals. Numbers are fine. But when you have equations, that's when we have to consider
Right.
the encoding. So a budget report, I wouldn't consider math, right?
Right.
Any hooser. For true math, or like I just did an OER, open educational resource textbook that was an algebra book in math. It was a
Okay.
PDF that the faculty had just downloaded. And so we see the gamut. We see PDF, we see Word, HTML. What I would recommend to anyone watching this who needs to create accessible math, this is my personal, what I think is best. A native Word document that has math embedded is MathML. The reason for that, it gives you the most amount of options if you need to take that document elsewhere. You can take it to HTML accessibly. You could take it to Braille with a little bit of editing. You could take it to audio with a little bit of editing, large print with a little bit of editing. You're going to need a couple of third-party software tools, but reach out to me for more information on that process because, again, while it's not like the math isn't difficult, it's the process to get there. Did I answer your question correctly?
Yeah. Yeah.
Appropriately? Okay.
I think so.
It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a it's a big question. Like that's just the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about math and STEM content in general. I mean, so this has been great. This has been very very interesting. I haven't
I,
heard of Math ML, to be honest. That's the
so
first time I've heard of
one
it.
thought just to add to it, what we look at to make it accessible is like as a sighted person, right? Let's say we had a long equation, takes a whole page of
Mhm.
paper to fill out. What our brains do and what we do as visual people is we tend to look at little components of the equation. When you do not have vision and you rely on tech, it would be the equivalent of someone just reading a math equation at you hecka fast and you just being required to know what part to do first. So what makes math accessible is the ability to navigate different components of that math problem. And that's what MathML allows. So you can look at
Ah, got it.
A of the equation, part B, and transition
Got it.
left to right
Okay.
versus it being a figure tag, right, or a figure element in whatever
Right.
platform, and you just get the alt text. It's
The
kind of
alt
like
text. Right. Okay.
it's a poor user experience. So I just wanted
Got
to
it.
truncate
Got it.
that up.
So it adds like a little bit of navigability to it. Is that right? Okay.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
That's what
Got
the
it.
difference is between like that's what makes it accessible, if you will.
Got it. Um, let's switch back to content. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what's some of it? So you talked a little bit about like what on content on these micro topics. What's your best performing content? Like if you go to your YouTube channel right now, has there been one that, I don't want to say gone viral, but has gotten like a lot more views than others?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of funny. I hate it because I'm the accessibility guy and it's not accessibility related in my opinion.
Oh,
However,
okay.
so earlier when I had mentioned like how I would generate ideas for content, right? It's from working and these things come across and I'll go create a video on it. So part of the process when we do alternate media, so we have a textbook from a publisher, right? And we need to convert it to XYZ, whatever it might be, Word, PDF to Word. A lot of times the publisher textbooks will have crop marks, right? Like where they
Okay.
cut the book, where they literally
Right.
cut and scan the book. And if you've never worked with a publisher book, you've probably never seen it. However, envision, right, this digital document's being sent to a press. They have to cut it, make a billion copies, and overcharge everybody. So my video that is the best one ever is how to resize pages in a PDF. So basically like changing the size from like an 11 by 17 to an 8.5 by 11 document. So it's not accessibility related. However, what I would say is it's sort of related to like pre-work to what
Right.
you then would do to
Right.
make the file accessible. And lo and behold, my top videos cropping a PDF, it's got 70,000 views. I'm like, what? Just how to crop a PDF. Um, a couple of the other ones are covering like professional OCR programs. Like there's this tool called Abby Fine Reader that is a professional OCR tool that can convert large volumes of scanned images into Word documents that you could then
Okay.
edit for Braille or audio. Um, but yeah, it's funny. I feel like my videos don't get a whole lot of love, but it just depends on the topic, the time of the year.
Right.
And my goal is to, if you search anything accessibility related, I hope you get to see my face. So I cover tons of software, tons of topics. Um, yeah,
You could be the PDF guy too, just based
exactly,
on.
exactly. Yeah, based on some of the video
Yeah.
content for sure, for sure.
Uh, okay, so I want to, kind of go back. Is it actually? Are you working on any interesting projects you could share a little bit out right now? I'm not sure. Maybe don't share your names, but maybe an interesting problem or some accessibility document or interesting thing they're working on.
Um, like right this second.
No, maybe not right this second, but maybe the
Yeah, yeah.
last, I don't know, 6 to 12 months.
Um, speed, speed and accuracy is something people request. So something that's on my docket right now is I got a Sunday night email, Sunday afternoon, about 2 p.m. local time. Hey Shawn, we have about 800 pages that need to be accessible by Monday. Can you
Wow.
do it?
Right.
And I'm the accessibility guy. I can do anything. And I have a team that supports me.
Right.
And so I said yes. And then I get the documents and they're so complex. Like rookie move, Shawn. You think I've been doing this for so long. but I still learned this lesson painfully that it was a lot more work than I thought. So
Right.
what I'm trying to say is something that comes up a lot, and if I could give any education to people out there, it's not that accessibility is difficult. It can be. There are times where it is difficult, but it is not fast. Like to make a document fully compliant, um, it ranges on speed based on how complex the source file is. But that's a message that I would get out is like, if you need your documents accessible, get them to your vendor, your remediator, to the accessibility guy, like as soon as possible, as many days in advance as you can get. In a perfect world, these 800 pages, I would have liked to have at least a whole week.
Mhm.
And even that is pushing it depending on workload. As far as interesting endeavors, um, yeah, I mean, I support a lot of academic institutions. And so just converting large scale PDFs, so like books, textbooks that over 1,000 pages in PDF, converting them over to Word while trying to retain the page layout as best as possible while making it accessible has been an interesting project. Um, if you're asking, I think I get what you're getting at. Like personally, the thing I'm most excited about right now is I'm developing trainings. So I have multiple clients that I do instructor-led trainings, and I am just in the trenches of content creation that isn't necessarily going to live on YouTube, but accessibility for designers, accessibility for project managers, accessibility for graphic designers, math STEM content, closed captioning. So to me, these are very interesting areas because what I see on YouTube a lot of the time is like this cookie cutter approach, or with all due respect to a lot of videos that are out there, the people weren't subject matter experts. And so if you are trying to learn this complex thing, a lot of times it's just a PowerPoint slide deck that someone's walking through, and you walk away from it feeling like, okay, but I have like a real project I need to do. And so where I get excited with these presentations is like being able to deep dive into, all right, I'm going to give this training to 200 people that need to close caption their videos. Like, how can I make this better than any content that exists on YouTube? Um, I try to frame it like that. So that's what I'm personally excited about. Uh, and then launching my courses. So that's been like personal projects. But otherwise, like you've been doing this long enough, or for me, I would say it's kind of like the same old stuff, just a different day. It's kind of like in the Matrix where Neo's like staring at the screen, it's just like these green numbers. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't even
yeah.
see content anymore, man. I just see blocks, text that should be a heading. Alt text
Right,
on
right,
this is great, but that's just with any job, right? I've been doing it for so
right.
long. I like working on the really hard stuff, like people that are actually blind and actually need content, and we have to do it right now. And they have a phone with
Right.
voiceover. Like trying to troubleshoot those complex accommodations are way more fun to me than making 1,000 pages accessible. That's just a matter of work, horsepower.
Are you a Hormozy fan? Just
I am. I am.
so I am too. So we can talk about that later. I don't want to talk about it in this podcast,
Yeah.
but
No, he's a cool
yeah,
dude.
yeah. I got both
Yeah.
of his books, so you can't see my shelf. I got background,
Uh,
but yeah, I've got both of his books right here, my back.
exactly. Some of the stuff isn't quite relatable, at least not for me, because I'm a local small business, but I love the concepts and yeah, actually the reason I went with school, just because it's related, it has the most accessibility features I could find natively.
Oh,
It's
okay,
simple, easy
okay,
to use, and the price point is right for content creators. Whereas some of these other tools out there, I mean, unless you are coming with a big bag of money, like you can't get
yeah,
started. So I appreciated school for a lower price point as a content creator to give it a shot. I don't know if anyone's going to buy the stuff that I'm trying to sell, but this gives me an opportunity. Um, and it's mostly accessible. It is not fully accessible.
right.
However, I've reached out to their team already and given some suggestions on things they could do to improve like their button labels for accessibility. But yeah, I digress.
Button labels. So
Exactly.
I definitely, I know you're in the, a lot of the remediation space, but I have to ask you this because, we, we are a big fan. I'm sure you are too, of not fixing, but addressing accessibility while you're creating it, as opposed to fixing 1,000 pages or 800 pages at the end. Have you met, or in your experience, what is your experience with trying to convince organizations to just change their processes and their tooling so that, whether it's a professor or a staff or whoever's creating that content can just get their content accessible in the first place, or at least get it like 80% accessible, as opposed to disregarding it and then call the accessibility guy to fix it at the end?
Right. Yeah, it's a golden question. I wish I had an answer. It depends on the organization. It depends on level of support that organization is willing to give for staff development or training. But yeah, I mean, anytime we could bake in accessibility from the start, you're going to have a much cleaner, faster, more efficient, less expensive process. Most of the things that I teach and I fix can easily be done at the start. And so I think a big part of it's education. So again, it depends on the industry you're coming from. And because of my role, I see a lot of different industries. My education, academia area, in my opinion, they're inundated with, you need to learn how to do this. And so
Right.
It's difficult, right? It's like calling a mechanic and asking them to teach me how to change my engine if I needed that, right?
Right.
In some cases, in some organizations, in some situations, it is going to make way more sense to pay somebody else to do it. Like, if you are under a time crunch and you do not have the staff resources, like time, but you got money, send it out. If you're sitting on staff that don't have anything to do and money, there are some good candidates in there that can learn how to do this accessibility. You can get training from myself or other organizations. It's challenging to be certified in accessibility. This is probably a different conversation. I don't know if I even want to go down this path. It's just challenging to be certified in accessibility. Most of them are homegrown. There are a couple of reputable organizations. Mine isn't one of them. However, it's one of those things where my experience, YouTube channel, those things kind of speak for themselves. So I lean into that. But at the end of the day, my course isn't going to certify you in anything. It's going to teach you the skills. I can give you a certificate, but that's it. And so for those who are trying to change the mindset of their organization, they're going to need buy-in from their leaders, both financially and like, is spiritually the right word? Like, they need to think that this is the right thing to do, right? But I've seen it. I've seen it happen on a large scale. I've worked in an institution where I helped give support and guidance to all 116 California community colleges, and we worked all the time to raise the bottom bar, giving webinars over and over and over on how faculty can make their baseline documents a little better. There's some stats out there, and I think you've even posted recently on LinkedIn about them, about like, and maybe it wasn't you, something like 80% of the accessibility issues that we find in web scans are like low-level stuff, like missing headings, missing alt text, right? Now that's web. With documents, it's a little more nuanced, but yeah, it's a tricky thing, and it really matters on the organization's situation. But it can be done. You need leadership that's on board. That's the number one thing, and a little bit of money, because if you're asking your staff to take on new work, I think it's important that they be compensated as such. Because accessibility is not, we're not making a sandwich over here. This is a skill set that many businesses have, gotten wise, and they're hiring now. I have never seen more hiring than I have today for accessibility specialists, analysts. But then we get down to the other problem is there's no certification. There is no reputable, there's a couple, like I said, but on a large scale situation, colleges don't teach this stuff. You can't get a degree in accessibility. Right. However, I think if you check out my YouTube channel, you can see the gamut. I don't even cover web accessibility. There's so much that you can learn in this space, working with people with disabilities, matching person to technology, assistive technology, but we're all out here like fending for ourselves. So that wasn't your question, but what I'm trying to say is, yes, you can make organizational change, implementing universal design into the start of any model. However, it's all about the organization. if they don't want to do it, it's not going to happen.
For sure.
That was
Yeah.
a
And
really
it's,
long answer. My apologies.
no, you answered it. No, Shawn, that was great. Right. So before we wrap up, are there any questions I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I think I'm the type of guy that can talk and flow and kind of go in any direction. So I feel good about what we've talked about today.
Cool. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Shawn. I mean, this has been a great talk. I, really enjoy, talking to entrepreneurs and also obviously experts in accessibility. Thank you very much. And if anyone wants to find you, I think it's super easy, right? You're the accessibility guy in everything, in YouTube and Instagram, on Fiverr.
But yeah, reach out to me if anyone ever has any questions. And yeah, I could be your champion for inclusion. That's what I like to say. Eugene, also, I just like to take a moment to tell you, I think your product is incredible. And I'm not one to publicly endorse products, but I do love your product a lot. And I think that it has the potential to solve a lot of accessibility problems for people, not just as an accessibility tool, but for a document creation tool. So nice work there. And yeah, keep on doing it. I have something, but I don't want it in the recording. I have some feedback for you that we should maybe talk about later on how to get the tool buttoned up even a little bit more from a super SME perspective. But yeah, I would just say that I think your product's great, and that's a real statement. I'm not trying to fluff you up. I really like it, and I think it's a very valuable tool that people can benefit from using. So
thank you very much.